Good morning, Ollie at Berkeley, and welcome to our Friday special event series. Today, we're very excited to be hosting Professor Robert Full. Robert is a Howard Hughes Medical Institute professor in integrative biology. He received all of his degrees from SUNY Buffalo before joining the Berkeley in 1986. He directs the Polypedal Laboratory, studying animal motion science to inspire the design of novel materials and robots. He is founder of Berkeley Center of Interdisciplinary Bioinspiration in Education and Research, serves on the National Academies of Sciences Board for Life Sciences, and is an elected fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Robert received Berkeley's Distinguished Teaching Award, is a National Academy of Sciences mentor in the life sciences, and leads education programs whose goal is to expand the STEM workforce by fostering inclusive excellence. His talk today is called Bio-Inspired Design, Compressed Cockroaches, Gliding Geckos, and Smart Squirrels. Take it away, Robert.
Thank you, Matt, and welcome everybody. Thanks so much for coming. Here are some of the creatures that I'll talk about. I'll start off by explaining my motivation. That's me when I was young, and we used to come from Western New York and drive all the way to the beaches of Florida during spring break. And I really liked weird animals, like these crabs and cockroaches. I also had a lot of interest in biomotion because that's what I really wanted to do. I wanted to play Major League Baseball, and I tried out for the minor league Pittsburgh Pirates. And well, I'm here, not there. But I did, when I came to Berkeley, got using the same techniques I'll show you, got to analyze the motion of a pitcher from the Oakland Athletics, which was pretty fun. As mentioned, I got all my degrees at SUNY Buffalo, partly because I was a first-generation college student. My parents didn't finish high school, and I didn't really know what college was. But SUNY Buffalo was great, and I had a wonderful mentor. I went and did a postdoc at the University of Chicago, a little bit further west, a little bit less snow, a little more windy. And this is my 35th year at Cal, and I feel incredibly fortunate to have that journey. I'm in the Department of Integrative Biology. What is that? Well, we integrate the level of organization of organisms from genes to ecosystems. We look at a diversity of organisms, and then we also look at them through time, through evolution. And we've gone on to integrate beyond the biological disciplines with engineering, physics, chemistry, mathematics, and more. What this allowed us to do is to really look at this integration, to show really how it showcases nature as a library of design artists. So this is the area I'll talk about. Some call it biomechanics or biodesign. It's just basically learning from nature. And here are some of the click examples, like a Velcro and flippers that led to wind turbines and lotus leaf, wonderful paint, and I'll show you our gecko example. This area of biomechanics is becoming the leading paradigm for the development of new technologies. That's leading to significant scientific, societal, and economic impact. If you look at the publication rate, it's pretty extraordinary. It's doubling every 2 to 3 years, whereas most areas in science, it's about a dozen. There was a journal founded in 2007. I got to be that founding, called Bioinspiration and Biomechanics out of London in the Institute of Physics. And I've been really fortunate to be its editor-in-chief since 2013. And it has wonderful examples of this area. And I get to see everything from around the world, all the different discoveries and how they've been translated. And the area in particular of most rapid growth is bio-inspired robotics. And so that's what I'm going to show you some examples of. There's really now like a zoo of amazing robots, and every day there are new ones that are being discovered. And so to this end, we created a center called CYBER, the Center for Interdisciplinary Biological Inspiration in Education and Research. To look at this, I'll show you the research, but I will talk about the education at the end. And more recently, American Association of Advanced Science, AAAS, founded another journal in 2016 called Science Robotics, because robotics was so game-changing. And Berkeley got the inaugural cover shown here from my colleague in electrical engineering science, Ron Fearing, for his hopping robot. I'll show you a video of that at the end. And so I'm very fortunate to be on its science advisory board to participate in the publishing of the wonderful discoveries. So what I want to do this morning is to basically show you the areas of the field through the discoveries we made and the lessons we've learned from nature. So I'll go through these four. The first lesson we've learned is that animals are really good at managing energy effectively. So this is the area I'll talk about as bio-inspired field robotics. And so this is what we do in my lab. This is a cockroach running on a treadmill. And you probably should ask, why are you doing this? This is another cockroach. This is an 8-legged scorpion, a 44-legged centipede running on a treadmill, and an 8-legged sideways running ghost crab, the ones I used to chase on the beach, fastest terrestrial invertebrate. And we want to understand their motion. In fact, the mantra of our lab is diversity enables discovery. Looking at these diverse creatures gives us hints about novel principles. Now, in terms of movement, you might think, okay, well, you get more legs. Are you then closer to the perfect way to move, a wheel? And many people have hypothesized this as one possibility. That's not what we see at all. What we find is that running with legs is like a bouncing ball. You actually take the energy of motion, you store it in a spring, and then you release it back. And you say, well, how could that be for these different creatures? Well, here's what we discovered. We discovered 2, 4, 6, and 8-legged animals all bounce along like a pogo stick. We call it a mass spring system. So your one leg works like 2 legs of a trotting dog working as one, or 3 legs of an insect, they use tripods, or 4 legs of a crab, all bouncing along like this kangaroo. And they all have about the same relative stiffness when we got this. We wondered then, since robots couldn't really venture outside, if we took the principles we discovered here from the creatures and made a robot with a leg that was similar in terms of the stiffness of a spring, could it run outside? And here's the first robot that could maneuver effectively outside using legs. We called it Rex for robot hexapod. It can go 2 or 3 meters per second. And here's the commercial version of Rex. It's sold by Boston Dynamics. You may have seen that they also make humanoid robots and dog robots that do routines like dancing and things. But this one was tested to show the advantage of legs over 40 different surfaces. And it's far like this difficult terrain. It's far superior to anything with tractors and wheels. So we really understood the advantages of legs in rough terrain. We also took it to even rougher terrain in Capitol Hill to show the benefits of bio-inspired design and the wonderful capability of this area of being inspired from nature. So there's Rex on the steps. Now you say, well, why is my taxpayer money going to this? What can this really accomplish? Here's just one scenario to show you we've been working on for years. Here's Rex, and you may remember there was a subway explosion years ago in Spain, a series of bombs, and they didn't know what to do. The first responders, is it chemical? Is it biological? Is it nuclear? The idea is to send the robots down and to begin to detect what's there quickly. And now Rex also has a little arm on it. So, it's trying to save people, so it doesn't have to pay. It just goes right in and analyzes what's there, or can take a sample and then quickly return it. In addition to the ground robots, there's now a coordination with drones that can also fly in and have a different perspective. So Rex now uses a LiDAR, a laser rangefinder, to find out where the stairs are, and then it actually changes its gate from that tripod gate to a wave gate in order to maneuver back up the stairs and return the sample. So you can imagine a bunch of these coming in whatever entry point is available to quickly determine what the risk is, what the hazard is. Now, in our study of the cockroaches, we found something quite unusual, which is when the American cockroach goes really fast, it's bipedal. It runs on its back 2 legs, and the pattern of bouncing is still, whether it's 6 legs or 2 legs, just like what you see when you run. And so it may be that actually cockroaches were the first biped. It's possible. And of course, to demonstrate this general principle, if you work with amazing engineers that like we do, they can actually make robots do this too, even when they're 6-legged. So this is a bouncing robot using those same principles. In fact, the principles we've extracted are so general that they can be used to set the stiffness of prosthetics to allow people to regain function. And so the principles are so general that they have are part of the influence of many fields, and we're incredibly excited about the potential application of these principles. In addition, when I published that paper that cockroaches can run on 2 legs, I had a call from a company called Pixar, and they said, "Hey, we're making a movie about bugs, and you have bugs running on 2 legs. Could you help us make the characters?" And so that's what we did. We spent a lot of time making all these characters and helping them, which was pretty interesting, pretty exciting. So here's one of the bipedal bugs. And we learned a lot about how we use motion to develop characters, not copy their motion, but develop their personalities. And so that was a wonderful collaboration. If you remember anything from my talk, this is what you should remember, which is you never know where curiosity-based research will lead. And I hopefully, just in that first example, I've shown you that you could not anticipate those kinds of connections. All right, the second lesson I'll talk about is the fact that animals and the environment are really inseparable. Even though we study things in the lab, we know that we need to look at the environment. So I'll talk about attachment, and that's an example of the incredible advancement in bio-inspired materials. In fact, there's so many things being developed. Here's just a list of the different capabilities of the bio-inspired materials and the creatures that are inspiring them. And this list is just, every day new discoveries come out about the wonderful capabilities for biomaterials. And that's in part because natural technologies are now finally moving to a place where nature can be a wonderful teacher. And that's happening light speed. So attachment, what was our inspiration? Not this guy, but this one. So it's a gecko. It's a gecko. And as you know, that geckos are really good at sticking to things. So here's one from a TV show from France where they were climbing up a plexiglass sheet and slipped. And is holding on by one finger and one toe, and doesn't seem to be too disturbed. So it can hang over one toe, and it just puts the other one down and reconnects. So we looked at their feet, and what we found is that they look like alien feet. I mean, these are real gecko feet, and they're bizarre, right? They have bizarre toes. Why is that? We still don't quite know why that is. That would be a nice follow-up the next PhD project, but we've learned some about how they stick with these remarkable toes. And so here's a quick video of what we found. That's about 10 years of work in a few seconds. So if you zoom in on a gecko foot, what you'll see is they have these leaf-like structures called lamellae. And if you zoom in on a lamellae, you see the secret. They have huge numbers, millions of hairs, and each of the hair have the worst case of split ends possible, like 100 to 1,000 split ends, where they become nano size. And so this is really, a nanomaterials project. And so, of course, our question was, how do they stick? And so what I told an undergraduate at the time, Tanya, Tanya, you just have to get the hair and measure the force that the hair can generate, despite the fact that you can hardly see the hair, it's so small, and you certainly can't easily manipulate it. Well, she didn't know I was joking. And we were working at the time with Stanford on a very fancy micro electromechanical system, a sensor device for the smallest forces, which is quite a technical achievement. Tanya took the hair with her surgical hands, glued it to an insect pin, took a wire, and then pushed it on the wire and bent the wire and measured how much force it required to bend the wire. And she got the same result we did. So she actually measured the force of a single gecko hair. And I would say throughout my career that undergraduates are our secret weapon. And that's because they don't know what can't be done. And that is incredibly important when you go for creativity. Yes, a lot of times they do things that aren't productive, but they come up with things that we don't see because our mind is fixed. And so I've had just amazing undergraduates at Berkeley, and I feel so fortunate. I'll show you some of them, but here's Tanya. And so what did we find in looking at this and making these force measurements? What we discovered was that the gecko hairs don't stick by Velcro or by suction or by glue or capillary action. These 2 billion nanosized split ends stick by intermolecular forces called van der Waals forces. It's just hard to believe. It's just amazing. But what we did is we went through and, of course, got a physicist who works on van der Waals forces. And we gave him the challenge of give us an experiment that we could do that would convince you that that's really what's happening. And he did. He didn't believe that it would work at all. It did, and of course, he wanted to be on the next paper, which he was. So it was a wonderful interdisciplinary collaboration. Now, if you look at these, this is just one gecko, right? There's a lot of geckos, and we are incredibly fortunate to have museums in our building, in the Valley Life Science building on campus. Here's one of them, the Museum of Vertebrate Zoology. And it literally is a library of design ideas. It's not a public museum, but it has incredible research resources where you have access to biodiversity. You can see how important it is. Here's my former graduate student, Ann Peaty, who says, okay, I'm gonna look and see all these different geckos and how different their hairs may be. And that's what she did for part of her thesis. And what she found was there's incredible diversity. So the one I showed you is on the left, but all of them have different hairs of different structure, size, thickness, different numbers of split ends. Why? Honestly, we still don't know. My guess is that allows them to stick better to particular surfaces, but we don't know. Tremendous diversity that we want to further explore. So what we end up doing then is to take actually one of the simplest creatures. It wasn't even a gecko. it's a lizard, but it just had a hair without the extensive branching to study. And then working with my colleague, Ron Fearing in engineering, he was able to make one of the first synthetic self-cleaning dry adhesives, learning from the gecko, a nanoarray that had a lot of the properties of what we see in the gecko. Now, it takes a pretty long time to translate this into products, but one of the former postdocs, who now directs the Max Planck Institute in Germany, started a company called Nano Grip Tech, and now finally it's advancing in its association with another company to begin to make gecko-inspired adhesives for wearables, for different types of sports, as well as medical equipment. And so here's the first human supported by a gecko-inspired adhesive. That's my former graduate student, now professor at Lewis and Clark on the left, and that's his firstborn child. This was done with a group from Stanford, incredibly exciting. And the reason we're protecting her is because the gecko foot has an interesting property. It sticks when you pull down on it, but it releases when you push up. And so we didn't want it to be bumped and have her fall. And, you know, she's going like, Dad, what are you doing? You know, why am I doing this? It was pretty funny, but we could show the incredible effectiveness of this kind of adhesive. And now then you might ask, well, then how do they actually let go? I mean, it's also an important question. Here's what they do, which is pretty weird, right? So they peel their toes in milliseconds as they run up surfaces. And they just do this very strange thing. It works well, and we understand the mechanism by which this peeling occurs to allow them to detach. Well, working with our wonderful colleagues at Stanford, they designed the first robot named StickyBot, which is up on my wall actually, that could climb up smooth surfaces. So here's StickyBot climbing up with these gecko-inspired adhesives on its toes. And they decided that, even though they thought it was sort of silly and ridiculous, that, you know, that peeling thing wasn't a bad way to pull off their toes. And so this is a remarkable team. Mark Krakowski and now Sangbae Kim, who's at MIT, amazing robotics engineers. It just shows sort of how all of our projects to really move things forward end up being interdisciplinary teams where each team in different disciplines benefits with their own field by the interaction, and the collective discoveries are beyond what any single team could do. So no individual team could have done this, but the collection does, and that's the way we do our science to make breakthroughs. And so, who would have imagined 10 years later with Tanya that we would be briefing the United States House of Representatives, a STEM Ed caucus, on undergraduate research and American innovation? Extraordinary, although it's quite a challenge to be a Capitol Hill. But again, I hope this shows you another example that literally you never know where curiosity-based research will lead. And so in the geckos, Ann Peaty, the student I mentioned, she was trying to discover how they could run upside down. And it was hard because they kept letting go. And she said, you know, when they let go, they always fall on their bellies. They go into this like skydiving Superman posture. I said, what? Okay, let's look at this. Let's make them do that and see what's going on. And so we put them on underneath a surface, shook it a little bit, and here's what we discovered. That's real time. If we slow it down, you can see what they do. They use their tail to do an air righting response. They just swing their tail around, and then they're in the skydiving posture. Now, this was unusual because they would never have shown to glide in nature. They don't have the gliding adaptations of other lizards. So with my colleague, Robert Dudley, we used his wonderful vertical wind tunnel. So you've probably seen people practice skydiving in these. The air blows up, and we put a little tree trunk outside it, and then we wanted to see could they glide. And what we found was absolutely they could do actually beautiful equilibrium gliding in this wind tunnel, and it was amazing how they could be so stable. Here's a picture of it. So here's the fact that they can glide, but you can also see their wonderful adhesive toes there, the lamellae. And here's what they could do with their tails. So that it turns out they could steer with their tails. They swing it one way, they turn left. They swing it the other way, they turn right. Sort of an amazing capability with their tails. And so, of course, then we had to see if they glide in nature. And so, picking another graduate student, Artie Yousefi, off he went to Singapore and Southeast Asia to look at these creatures and try to see if he could see them actually gliding in nature. So here's the first glide in nature that we captured. The animal's at the end of the red line. And then if you look on the right, you'll see it hitting a tree. All right, let me show you what happens when they collide with the tree. It's unbelievable, actually. They're going 6 meters per second, and watch how they interact with the tree. They crash headfirst into the tree, and then they go head over heels backwards, and they use their tail for stability. Because they're small, they don't get injured, and that's the way they can adapt for landing. Artian was able to build a physical model of this landing, a soft robot gecko, where we could manipulate the parts to test whether or not the tail was important and really how they attach to surfaces. And could this be a landing mechanism for vehicles that are gliding or flying? Okay, so that one is on bio-inspired materials. Let me talk about the next one. One of the hottest areas are bio-inspired soft robots. And this is an area where it's really important because we've made a lot of great robots, and then you take them outside and they break. They're really not usable. And so one of the distinguishing features of animals is that they're so robust. They're incredibly robust. And so the whole industry of designing devices is shifting from rigid structures to soft structures, like we see in the animals. In fact, it's just an explosion again. And so if you look at all of these different bio-inspired soft robots and the number of publications in the new field of soft robotics, it's just taken off. And in our journal, that's one of the most frequent papers that we publish, is that capability of soft materials that you can use for so many different things. And so what did we wonder about? We wondered about the cockroaches. And you think of them as kind of crunchy and things, but they're actually good soft robots. Their skeleton provides support and protection, anchors their muscles. They can locomote with it, they can sense with it. But if you look at the exoskeleton carefully, what you see is that it's really just a bunch of skeletal plates and skeletal tubes with a compliant membrane attached to it. And so, again, collaborating with my colleague, Ron Fearing, he pioneered a new way to design a soft robot, an origami approach called smart composite microstructures. So what he was able to do is to take a design drawing, laser cut it, laminate it, and then fold it up to make a robot. And so here's one of the first robots called Dash, for Dynamic Autonomous Sprawled Hexapod. And you could then design in robustness that would allow it to really function for a task in nature. And so you have to be careful what you tell graduate students, because we said just off, oh, what happens if you throw it off the top of a building? So they did that with the computer science building. Here there's thesis. hitting the ground, and we're wondering, is it still working? It's still working. That's pretty robust. Even more extraordinary than that, the group of graduate students realized that, hey, we should form a startup. This could be pretty neat for a design of an educational robot. And so they did. They did a Kickstarter, developed a wonderful design, called it Dash Robotics, and amazingly worked really effectively, so effectively that Mattel picked it up for a toy robot. They called it Kamigami. Here's the actual robot. And I'll tell you later, the cool thing is in classes at Berkeley, the students get to build this origami robot from flat sheets, test it and redesign with it. Okay, so that's the sort of the notion of what you might do for designing with this incredible soft robotics approach. Well, my graduate student Kashajaram wondered, can this explain how they seem to be able to go anywhere? And so what we did is we said, okay, let's check that out. We'll CT scan them, and we'll have them go through the smallest crevice that we could. They can go through a crevice that is the height of 2 stacked US pennies. They can compress their body by over 50%, which is extraordinary, right? How do they do this? And so we took a look at this. So here is the cockroach standing up on the left, its normal freestanding height. And we went through and looked at the smallest gap it could go through, which is 3 millimeters. And so you'll see that going through it in real time. So they can squish through almost anything because they don't have hard parts like a mouse might or something. They just squish, and they're really good at going through these tiny spaces. How good are they going through them? Well, they can go through these tiny spaces 3 millimeters or 4 millimeters. And my students wondered, my undergraduates particularly said, we wonder how if they could locomote through vertically compressed spaces. So it's like 2 plates, one on top of the other, and go into that space and then run through it. And I said, well, that's silly. They're squished in half. Their feet can't touch the ground. They can't move. Now that's a waste of time to try to do that kind of experiment. And they said, we already done it. here's the results, which is just amazing to me. So the top one is unconfined locomotion. So there's no top to it, and it's real time, which is so fast you can hardly see it because they can run 1.5 meters a second, and then we slow it down 20 times. So here's the unconfined version. It's just really fast, and you can see, they're moving along with a particular gait, this kind of alternating tripod. The next one is where it's compressed a bit, still really fast, but now you can see how they're altering their gait, and they're using their legs differently. They're using different parts of their legs. The bottom one is the smallest surface gap that they could confined space that they could move in, 4 millimeters. So I'll first show it real time, and then I'll slow it down 20 times. Okay, this is real time. Now it's slowed down 20 times. So yes, it is the case that in the smallest spaces, in your walls, in your ceilings, in your floors, that they can zoom around that fast. And what we found is that they're not using their feet at all. They're compressed, and they're using the spines on their leg to have sufficient friction in order to move. So then we wondered, how robust are these? Well, if you're an engineer and you want to test that, you put them in a materials testing machine. So we did that. And so here's the test of their robustness. No cockroach was harmed in this experiment. We tested them actually flying and running before and after this, and this did not do anything to them. So we looked at their stress-strain relationship, different rates. And what we discovered remarkably was that even at 800 times their body weight of squishing them, they weren't injured, right? So it's just amazingly robust. So we said, okay, we have to build something like this to test to see if it can also withstand this kind of compression. So So my student looked at the architecture of the creature and built one of these origami robots. He called it CROM, for crawling robot with articulated microstructures. So here's CROM freestanding, and here it is compressed. And here's a video of CROM running uncompressed and then compressed. In our interactions with first responders in FEMA, they told us, it looked much more like a cockroach originally. And they said, you can't do that. Imagine someone's trapped and a cockroach is coming at them. And so we made this shell that we think is a little bit easier to interact with, but it can do it. It can move even though it's compressed 50% because of this wonderful nature of being a soft creature. And so we now envision that bio-inspired robots can have tremendous impact on conservation, monitoring, inspection, search and rescue, security, and we're looking at this with Professor Robin Murphy, who runs a wonderful center for urban search and rescue and people who've interacted with FEMA. So we're really excited about that capability of getting information that's important really quickly. Again, I hope that this is another example of the fact that you never know where curiosity-based research will lead. We just wondered how they could squish through stuff, and it's amazing actually to then be able to take those principles and use them. Okay, the last one I'll talk about is our ongoing project now, a recent project on the fact that animals can learn. And we call this area cognitive biomechanics. So we're talking about bio-inspired learning, decision-making, and even creativity and innovation. And so you may have heard a while back that, that DARPA had a robot contest called the DARPA Robotics Challenge. It was challenging. It's actually really hard to get robots to operate in unstructured environments. I know you see them doing amazing things, but they didn't have 3 months to practice on the same situation, same scenario. They had to do novel environments, and it's really hard, and yet not so hard for creatures. And so, what's the difference? That's what we wanted to find out. So this is a big challenge. So we call this cognitive biomechanics, and the animal we selected is a squirrel. So if you've ever been on Berkeley campus, there's a lot of squirrels, and people feed them all the time. And that was an advantage for us because it turns out the squirrels don't perform if you put them in small little cages. So we actually wanted to study them outside. And it turns out we had one of the world's experts, Professor Lucia Geckos, on squirrels from the psychology department. Just incredible wealth of knowledge that we worked together on this project. And so, why are we looking at squirrels? It's because they can do this. It's amazing, actually. How do they know what their capability of their body is? How do they know that the next branch is going to support them? Because if they make a mistake, the hawk eats them, right? And so how do they know this? It's an incredible capability. And so recently, Nate Hunt worked on this for his PhD. He's now a professor at University of Nebraska. And we published it in the journal Science. And so here's what we did. So we took this magnetic board with perches on it, and we wheeled it outside to the eucalyptus forest behind, to the side of our building. And so here's the setup. They usually take turns, but that one tried to cheat and cut in line. They take turns, and we give them peanuts. They like peanuts, and we train them a little bit to begin to get used to the structure, as you see here. But this is free ranging. This is outside. You can see students walking in the background. And what did we do? Here's one of the key experiments. And so what we did is we said, okay, we're going to give them rods or like branches of 3 different stiffnesses. Put a peanut in the landing perch and have them jump to get the peanut. And the question was, what would they do on these rods of different stiffnesses? because if it was important for them to jump off the stiff part, then they have to jump a long way. Whereas they may want to run down to the more compliant part, so they only have to jump a short distance. And so we hypothesized that there was a trade-off between their gap size, how far they have to jump, and how compliant their surface, their branch was they're jumping off of. We wanted to try to interrogate their brain about how they're making these decisions. And what we found was, sure enough, animals selected a shorter gap distance when the branches were stiffer, and a longer gap distance when the branches were compliant. But what we assumed is that, oh, well, they're probably equal in their decision-making, their trade-off. They're both equally important. This is completely wrong. And we could interrogate their decision-making, and it showed with a simple model that the animals cared 6 times more about jumping off a stable surface than how far they had to jump. And so that's a beginning to try to understand their decision-making. And then we did another experiment. We did an experiment where we had a very stiff platform. We had them jump off of it. They landed perfectly every time for the stiff platform, not a difficult task. And then we made the platform look exactly the same, except it was incredibly compliant. And so here's what happened for their first jump. We did 652 trials and they never fell, but they just made it in this one. And it turns out that all it took were 5 jumps until they were able to learn to land perfectly on the perch. It's sort of remarkable learning for a pretty difficult task. And so then we were pretty excited and we said, okay, let's do another experiment. Let's do a transfer learning. Let's move the perch back. Let's move it up so it's harder. And let's see if the ones who did it before do better than the ones who didn't. So we have the high-speed cameras rolling. We're collecting data ready for the first trial. And here's what they did. It like parkoured a wall and added a control point. It was innovating right before us, and of course it landed and looked at us like, okay, we're squirrels, you know, we can get into bird feeders, but it was remarkable because that was not, you know, something that they did before. And so we have lots of examples where they innovate like this, where we're trying to do a particular experiment, and it's more important that we find out how they get around it to understand the cognitive part of it. And so we have lots of examples of it, which is pretty amazing and incredibly exciting. And so we have a wonderful interdisciplinary team working on this, of people that work on metamaterials, ones that are actually recording in rats from the hippocampus to try to understand what the brain can tell us. And we have roboticists. But we're just, you know, in the sort of middle stages of this development, and I can't show you the agile robot yet. The most agile robot ever built is our goal, and you know we're not there, but we have some hints about it. And so let me show you the kind of latest robots that we're going to mesh together that hopefully will also allow this kind of decision making and thinking. So here they are. So the one on the upper left is the fact that we found spines are probably pretty useful. None of the robots you see have built the spines. And then there's one that can maneuver and jump on the bottom. Both of those from our lead at the University of Pennsylvania. And then the upper right is a robot called Salto from a grant we worked with Ron Fearing on at Berkeley, making just a monopod hopper and monopod jumper. So these are all the beginning robots to think about decision-making, learning, and innovation. So you can see the backbone bending one, you can see the one on the bottom doing jumping, and the monopod hopper just, you know, hops. And so we're able to do power amplification for animals to do that hopper. And so we're trying to put all these together to give it the agility that we see in the squirrels. And what partly we found was that much of the capability of the control is built into the morphology itself. So you also have to have a brain, and a control system. But so much of it is built in the morphology. We're calling this computational morphology. And the more we work with the metamaterials people, the more we realize that you can build a lot of intelligence right into the materials, which is what we find in the creatures. So it's a very good lesson. So another example of where you never know where curiosity-based research will lead. Stay tuned. We'll see what we can develop for these squirrels. So let me finish by telling you how we try to share our approach in research with these wonderful interdisciplinary teams with students. How could we set up a program to do that? And that's what HHMI has supported us on. So I got this wonderful HHMI grant, and the program I called Eyes Towards Tomorrow. And so it's involve, imagine, invent, and innovate. And what it is it really is the wonderful integration of discovery-based learning. So all our classes we try to have students make original discoveries in the classes through labs and field experiments. And it's combined with design-based learning, which is what Obama really pushed, that for a nation of makers, because the real power of the revolution is in its democratizing effect, because now almost anybody can innovate, and that's what's happening. And we strongly believe that diversity is demanded for that innovation, that the real promise rests in uniquely diverse communities that are engaged in these interdisciplinary approaches to solve important societal problems. So to this end, I created a course called Bio-Inspired Design, which in fact, the labs are going on right now as we speak. The students are doing a wonderful makerspace activity where they're designing novel splints for finger injuries. And in the past, they've built a wonderful prosthetic devices. I'll show you that. But this is open to everybody. There's no prerequisites. Our aims are science literacy. That is, we have the students use the primary research discoveries and extract the principles. We focus on giving them 21st century skills and teaming and community building, as well as a career path, a connection to the future. We have 180 students, 36 design teams, half freshmen, sophomores, half non-STEM students, the majority female, and about a quarter underrepresented and marginalized students from over 40 different majors. So we have incredible diverse interests across the campus to allow people to get together and share their unique perspectives for discovery and innovation. And we do it in the Geckos Institute of Design Innovation. This is like we have incredible space thanks to Paul Geckos, a 4-story makerspace building for undergraduates where they can do 3D printing and laser cutting and all these wonderful things. And there are interdisciplinary design-related communities there. One of the things we did is to have them initially 3D print a prosthetic hand for children. So that looks like this. And they first printed a finger, and their assignment was to print their finger, 3D print their finger, and then stand by the 3D printer and take a selfie. And they really like this exercise. And then as a team, we had them assemble all the fingers onto the hand. And so it was a great way to introduce them to the makerspace. And then they have several design projects. They make, as I mentioned, the origami robot. They also make a gecko-inspired adhesive and design things from it. Then they have a final project. Here's examples of a few of their final projects. One team developed a gecko-inspired tail balancing system for the elderly. Very cool. Or a spider-inspired sensing to restore touch in amputees. One on muscle atrophy resistant casts. So based on seahorse skeletons. So, you want to keep your movement in ways that don't harm you, but you want to restrict movements in other directions. Is incredibly clever. and one on a voice recovery system for throat cancer patients based on songbirds, use a different part of their larynx to produce sound. It's just amazing projects. So they all do this showcase, they do a video and do a poster to show off their stuff. In the larger picture, that's only one piece of what we're creating, that's the bio-inspired design course, which is part of a student-centered creative action community, we call it, because it also includes decal classes. Decal classes at Cal are where students teach the class. They're student-led classes. And so a couple of these that students teach, intro and for take the big course, and also ones for furthering design. And then we also have coupled to registered student organizations, student-led organizations. It's the Berkeley Bio Design Community, where a bunch of communities get together and they have wonderful activities like designs and bring in speakers and go visit different companies. We're really fortunate recently to have Berkeley and a wonderful donor support a new program called the Berkeley Discovery program. And here's sort of the arc that we want students, so when they enter in, they want them to follow over their career time at Cal. We applied for one of these, and fortunately, we got one of these departmental innovation awards for integrative biology. We called it Discovery for All, Empowering Inclusive Communities in Integrative Biology. So stay tuned. We're really excited to share the kind of approach I showed you with the campus. And just to conclude, we really see that diverse communities hold the key to creativity, that each voice has a unique benefit because we all benefit from inclusive excellence. Thank you, and go Bears.
Robert, this has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. I got to show my son about this parkour squirrel. He likes doing that all over the city. But we have time for a couple of questions. There's some people here who are very concerned about the well-being of that poor cockroach.
Honestly, they were never hurt, and literally we quantified it. That is, they could run the same speed after they were squished, and they can fly if the temperature is hot, and nothing happened to them. Now, of course, when we enter our building, we see people that have stepped on cockroaches every day. So, and we could actually tell them how they could more effectively squish them, actually, but they weren't harmed, and they're just so robust. But now we can begin to make it. So it's really, the soft robotics area is just exploding. You're going to see versions of this, and not just robots, but all devices having softer properties, because who wants a big metal thing interacting with people in your home or with children or your pets? It's just not, that's not going to happen, right? They're going to have to be soft structures to make them usable.
No, that's cool. Questions that's specifically about that cockroach is about whether you were able to measure the effects of, say, trauma. Like if it's able to demonstrate that it felt something or that it even thought something.
I have no idea how to do that or what that means, because they do this all the time. I mean, that's what they do. They squish themselves, and so it's an occurrence that's part of their natural behaviors.
Well, that is cool. There's a lot of people who are saying in the chat that this is their favorite talk of all. If you do have other questions for Robert, you can put them in there now and he can answer them. There's one at the very beginning here. Do you also study the movements of underwater creatures, like the octopus or squid?
Yeah, we don't, but there's a bunch of other people that do. And so that they do it in all the different environments, and there's been a lot of progress on looking at swimming. Again, the big breakthroughs are with soft robots, ones that can bend very much like we see in nature. And yes, has been incredible work in Europe. There's been a whole octopus project So if you look this up, there are soft octopus robots that both run on the ground, but they jet propel too, and they're amazing. And so yeah, that's at again light speed development is amazing. I get to see papers come in every day. It's like it's incredible. This is just and they may demonstrate something about building an octopus robot, but really what it is, it's a demonstration of a greater capability that can be used for many things, right? It's just a really nice example of the capability of different materials and control systems and designs.
That's cool. And there's a couple of more kind of practical questions here. There's a question about whether high school and middle school teachers could observe this kind of teaching and curiosity building in STEM.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do tours of our center. That's one way to do it. And also for a plug for the Lawrence Hall of Science, we work with the Lawrence Hall of Science, and they run with us teaching it a bio-inspired design camp for high school students, and so that's pretty fun. But for observing the class and things, we'd be glad to set something up. Absolutely. With that, so our dissemination, we've been able to disseminate class to this class and program to 4 other universities, as well as, like I said, the Lawrence Hall Science Summer Camp. But ultimately, we think it's sitting in a sweet spot where it can be used for K through 12. No problem. I did years ago teach a 6th grade class with this kind of approach. It totally worked. I mean, obviously the projects were simpler and we didn't have the quite technology, but the interest is very high, and it brings out the creativity. So I would like to continue to think about how we could develop a K through 12 program.
And what about our contingent? There are some folks here who would be interested in joining a makerspace. Older learners, is there a way?
Sure. So I'm on the, yeah, well, that's, we talked about this a little bit, but now if there's real, interest, so I'm on the Geckos Design Institute Faculty Council, and we meet and discuss possible programs that we develop, and this is one of the things we talked about, but really didn't have the interest that we needed. Now we can follow up with you if there's that interest, and they create programs all the time. So we created a Masters of Design program for 2 years. That is amazing. It's incredible in this amazing makerspace building. And so there are tours there. I think there are tours today of Geckos Design Institute that you can take to just kind of see what it's like. But if there's interest, that's what they do, is we create programs to potentially allow you to do things. And I just tell you that it's all the different programs in Geckos and the classes are just so much fun. They're so interesting, and it brings together such diverse people. Like I would say in our design class, we have a lot of different people. But what you see is that the people who think they're the designers of a structure or something, especially the engineers, they're not near the most creative people that come up with the ideas. I'll take an art history major any day for creativity. It's just, you bring what your experience has been, and as long as you put it, we work on teaming really hard, teaming activities, so that we make sure before there's a consensus that everybody has a voice and everybody shares and they feel comfortable in doing that. And then when we do that, we have this thing called a collaborative plan, where everybody kind of says what they can do, what they're best at, and they decide who does what when and things. And it works out, really well. And so it'd be interesting to develop a program with projects, that you might be interested in. I think that would be great. or even sit in on teams or something, or be a part of our biodesign community. that's another possibility, right? Our registered student organization. I think this is great. This is wonderful.
Well, Robert, it's wonderful to have you today and to know of your interest and to take up your suggestions. We have been working with the Lawrence Hall of Science on our National Science Foundation grant, which we'll fill you in on. And we've worked with the Jacob Center for Design. We are very interested in bringing OLLI members together with undergraduates. We see a lot of potential on both sides, having a good exchange. We've done some co-designing work, and we definitely see the future for that. And with you. So thanks a lot for today.
Great. I'm incredibly excited about this, and I think that it could add a whole nother dimension to the students' education if we can set up something. That would be fantastic. Okay. Outstanding.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks a lot for today. I know we've just run out of time, but thank you again for all of this.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. Take care.